Welcome to the Before AGI podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that, honestly, sounds a bit like science fiction, but it's very real and needs our attention right now. Autonomous weapon systems.
Uh-huh. You might hear them called AWS or sometimes, that more dramatic term, killer robots.
Exactly. And for you, our listener, someone who's keen on tech and its impact, this deep dive is all about cutting through the hype and getting to the core of what these systems are.
Yeah, we want to look at the debates swirling around them and, crucially, what they might mean for warfare and maybe even beyond.
We've got a lot of material here, things like international meeting timelines, ethical deep dives, the tech side of things.
Right, and our job really is to pull out the most important stuff for you. Help you grasp the basics, the big challenges, the potential futures of AI in conflict.
Without getting bogged down in jargon, hopefully. Yep. Think of this as your shortcut to getting up to speed on something that's not just for military folks anymore.
Absolutely. It has much broader implications for all of us.
So we'll start with the basics. What are these AWS things? How are they different from older weapons? Then we'll get into the arguments, the pros and cons.
The ethical minefield, which is huge,
right,
and what the world is trying or maybe struggling to do about it.
Get ready for some maybe surprising facts and hopefully some clarity on this really fascinating and sometimes, unsettling technology.
Definitely.
Okay, let's jump in. What actually is an autonomous weapon system? We hear the term, but what's the working definition we should use?
So at its core, it's a weapon system that can independently select and then attack a target. So no direct human command for that specific engagement once it's, activated.
Right.
The ICRC, that's the International Committee of the Red Cross, they have a pretty helpful definition focusing on that autonomy in the sort of critical functions, the selecting and attacking parts.
And that term, killer robots.
Yeah, that's the catchy, maybe alarming term used a lot, especially by advocacy groups like the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots. It definitely grabs attention.
It does. Now, what about laws, lethal autonomous weapon systems? Is that the same thing?
Good question. Law dogs are really a specific type, a subset of AWS. These are the ones using sensors, algorithms, to find, identify, and then engage targets with lethal force, all without a human giving the final okay for that specific attack.
So that's the human out-of-the-loop idea.
Exactly. That's the key phrase there. The U.S. Department of Defense, for instance, defines them as systems that, once you switch them on, can select an attack without needing any more human input for that action.
Okay. But it sounds like maybe not everyone agrees on the exact boundaries.
That's a really crucial point. Definitions actually vary quite a bit. China, for example, has a broader take that includes things like whether you can even stop it once it's started, or if it might hit things indiscriminately, or even if the system can learn and change on its own.
Interesting additions.
And NATO also looks at it broadly, a system deciding and acting based on what it learns about its situation. The UK talks about understanding higher level intent and acting without direct oversight.
So this lack of a single, universally accepted definition must be a real problem for, say, international talks or treaties.
It's a huge challenge. If you can't even agree on precisely what you're trying to regulate, making rules becomes incredibly difficult.
Right. It's not just semantics. It reflects deeper disagreements about how much autonomy is acceptable. Now, you mentioned levels of autonomy. It's not just autonomous or not autonomous, is it?
No, definitely not. It's more of a scale, a spectrum. We usually talk about three main levels, sort of benchmarks.
Yep.
First, you've got semi-autonomous, think human in the loop. These systems might track a target, maybe suggest an action, but they need a human to say, yes, engage, before anything happens.
Like some missile systems, maybe,
Huh?
where a human picks the target initially.
Kind of like that, yeah. A fire and forget missile could fit here, where the human makes the launch decision. Then there's supervised autonomous, or human on the loop.
On the loop.
Yeah. These systems can actually carry out tasks, including selecting and engaging targets, on their own. But crucially, there's a human operator watching who can step in and override it if needed.
Okay, so it's working independently, but someone's overseeing it and can hit the brakes. And the third level, that's the controversial one.
That's fully autonomous, the human out-of-the-loop scenario. Once activated, these systems operate completely on their own, selecting targets, engaging them, all based on their programming and sensor data. No human intervention required for specific attacks.
And I guess how much human control is involved at each level really changes the game in terms of accountability, predictability.
Absolutely. And the risk of things going wrong unexpectedly. It's central to the whole debate.
Understanding those levels definitely clarifies things. Okay, let's switch gears slightly. Why are some people or governments actually arguing for developing and using AWS? What are the supposed benefits?
Well, probably the most prominent argument is about reducing risk to your own soldiers. Sending robots into dangerous situations instead of people could mean fewer friendly casualties.
That makes sense from a military perspective. Protecting your own forces.
Right. Kathleen Hicks at the US DoD has mentioned this, using robots for those, dull, dirty, dangerous jobs.
We hear that phrase a lot. What else?
Another big one is increased precision. The argument goes that AI can process way more data much faster than a human, potentially leading to more accurate targeting.
So the idea is maybe fewer mistakes, less collateral damage, fewer civilian casualties?
That's the hope, or at least the claim. Better compliance with the laws of war, potentially. We've already seen precision weapons with some autonomy showing high accuracy.
So maybe counterintuitively, machines could be better at distinguishing targets in chaotic situations.
That's the line of reasoning, yes. Plus, they're seen as force multipliers. They don't get tired, they can operate 24/7, go into places humans can't easily reach. It boosts military capability.
Right, endurance and access. Any other points?
Sometimes you hear the argument about objective decision-making, the idea that machines aren't swayed by emotions like fear or anger or, the heat of the moment.
Less prone to panic or revenge, perhaps.
Potentially. They process sensor data without those human emotional filters, which could, theoretically, lead to more rational decisions under pressure.
Okay, so there are definitely arguments being made for military effectiveness and even potentially adherence to rules.
Yeah.
But these upsides come with some really heavy ethical baggage, don't they? What are the main concerns?
Oh, absolutely. Probably the biggest one is the accountability gap. This is fundamental. If a fully autonomous weapon makes a mistake, maybe commits an unlawful killing, who is responsible?
Right. Is it the coder, the commander who deployed it?
Yep.
The manufacturer?
Exactly. It's sometimes called the accountability trilemma. And the scary part is it could mean victims have no legal recourse, no justice. It challenges our whole legal framework.
A huge problem. What's another major worry?
The risk of unintended escalation. These systems can act incredibly fast, faster than humans can react. Imagine two autonomous systems from opposing sides interacting in an unexpected way.
You could get rapid, runaway escalation, like a flash war.
Precisely. And because of machine learning, these systems might even develop behaviors their creators didn't anticipate, making them unpredictable in complex situations.
That sounds incredibly dangerous. The speed and unpredictability combined. What about the human role itself?
That brings us to what many see as the core ethical issue: the erosion of human control and human dignity. Is it morally acceptable to delegate life and death decisions, the decision to kill a human being, to a machine?
Many would say absolutely not.
Right. The UN Secretary General, among others, has called it morally repugnant and politically unacceptable. There's a deep concern about removing human judgment, empathy, moral reasoning from the act of killing.
It feels like crossing a fundamental line, outsourcing our most serious decisions. And does that change how we even think about war?
It could lead to the dehumanization of warfare, making conflict seem like a cleaner, more sterile, algorithm-driven process. It potentially removes the visceral understanding of the human cost.
So war becomes less about human tragedy and more about data processing.
That's the fear. Machines lack empathy. They don't understand the value of a human life in the way a person does, or at least the way we hope a person does.
A very chilling thought. Are there concerns about fairness, too? Like who these systems might target?
Yes, definitely. Algorithmic bias is a serious concern. AI systems are trained on data, and if that data reflects existing societal biases, racial, gender, whatever those biases, can get baked into the weapon system.
So the AWS could end up being discriminatory in its targeting, maybe disproportionately harming certain groups?
That's a very real risk. It could automate and even amplify existing inequalities on the battlefield.
Wow. Okay, so the ethical concerns are profound. Given all this, what is the international community actually doing about it? Is anyone trying to regulate this?
Well, the main official venue has been the UN Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, the CCW. They started talking about law lobbyists back in 2014.
Okay, so it's been on the agenda for a while.
Yes, and in 2016, they set up a specific group, the Group of Governmental Experts, or GGE, just for laws. But progress has been really slow.
Why is that?
Mostly because the CCW works by consensus. Every country involved has to agree, which, as you can imagine, is hard to achieve on something this contentious. They've compiled a sort of rolling text of ideas, but no binding agreement yet.
Consensus is always tough. Are other UN bodies involved?
The UN General Assembly has weighed in, passing resolutions expressing concern, like one late last year, 78241, which got huge support. It basically asked the Secretary General to gather views from member states, with more talks planned.
So keeping the conversation going at a higher level.
And you also have the ICRC, the Red Cross, being very active. They're pushing hard for actual legally binding rules. They want prohibitions on certain types, like unpredictable AWS, or those designed specifically to target humans directly, and they constantly stress the need for meaningful human control.
We'll come back to that term. But it sounds like even with these efforts, countries are pretty divided.
Very much so. You have divergent state positions. A lot of countries, especially from the global south, want a preemptive legal ban on fully autonomous systems. They want to stop them before they're widely developed or used.
But the major military powers?
They're generally resistant. The US, Russia, China, countries investing heavily in AI and robotics, they oppose outright bans or major restrictions on development.
What are their specific stances, roughly?
Well, the US talks about the importance of human judgment in the use of force, but doesn't support a ban. China has, interestingly, called for a ban on the use of these weapons, but not necessarily on developing or making them.
A subtle distinction.
And Russia is pretty strongly against any legally binding rules or even a temporary halt, a moratorium. Even within alliances like NATO, while they have principles for responsible AI, the member countries don't all agree on whether a binding treaty is needed.
So it's a complex diplomatic landscape with key players pulling in different directions. You mentioned meaningful human control, again, MHC. Can you unpack that concept? Why is it so central?
Right. Meaningful human control, MHC, has become a kind of linchpin in these discussions. It's the ethical and legal benchmark everyone keeps coming back to.
What does it actually mean, though?
Essentially, it means humans have to retain substantive control over decisions to use lethal force. It's not just having a human somewhere in the chain, but ensuring genuine human judgment, awareness, and the real ability to intervene are always part of the process.
So it's about the quality and effectiveness of the human oversight.
Exactly. For MHC to work, you need the tech to be predictable, reliable, understandable. Operators need good, timely information. They need the actual capability to step in and override the machine effectively. And, crucially, there needs to be clear accountability.
And philosophically?
Philosophically, it means the weapon's actions should align with human moral reasons and be traceable back to human intent. It's seen as absolutely vital for keeping warfare within ethical boundaries, complying with law, and ensuring someone is ultimately responsible.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about ensuring technology serves human judgment, not replaces it in these critical moments. Now, who's actively opposing AWS? We mentioned the campaign to stop kill robots.
Yes, they're a major civil society movement pushing for a preemptive ban since 2013. They argue that existing laws of war just aren't equipped for this technology.
Are scientists involved too?
Very much so. Back in 2015, over 1,000 AI experts signed a famous open letter warning about an AI arms race and calling for a ban on offensive autonomous weapons.
That's a powerful statement from the people building the technology.
Indeed. And then in 2018, you had over 200 technology companies making a pledge not to develop or participate in lethal autonomous weapons. So parts of the industry itself are pushing back.
What about the general public? Is there much awareness or opinion?
There seems to be significant opposition. An Ipsos poll from late 2018 across 26 countries found 61% of people opposed laws. The main reasons cited were moral objections that it crosses a line and concerns about accountability.
So a pretty broad base of opposition, civil society, scientists, tech companies, and the public. Looking longer term, what are the big security risks if these weapons become widespread?
Well, the potential impacts are really significant and worrying. One is the risk of a new arms race. If major powers push ahead, it could trigger a dangerous competition, and these weapons could spread to unstable regions or even non-state groups.
Making the world potentially much less stable.
Exactly. Then there's crisis stability. We touched on this. The sheer speed and potential unpredictability could make international crises much more dangerous, increasing the risk of accidental or unintended escalation, flash wars.
Frightening. How might it change war itself?
It could lead to a profound transformation of warfare. Conflicts might become faster, maybe more reliant on technology than numbers, perhaps more lethal in some ways. It fundamentally alters the character of conflict.
And the role of people in it.
That's a huge debate. Will we see humans gradually replaced on the battlefield? Or will it be more about human-machine teaming? It forces us to reconsider the human role entirely.
And one last risk.
There's a concern that if countries believe they can fight wars with lower risk to their own personnel by using robots, it might actually lower the threshold for going to war in the first place. It
Yes.
becomes politically easier, perhaps.
Making conflict more likely. That's a sobering list of potential consequences. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's try to distill the absolute key takeaways about autonomous weapons systems.
Sure. First, this isn't just incremental change. AWS represent a really major shift in military technology with deep ethical, legal, and security
Sure,
consequences.
it's a big deal.
Second, there's this fundamental tension. Potential military advantages versus profound ethical worries and risks. They pull in opposite directions.
Got it. Advantage versus ethics.
Third, the international community is struggling to create effective rules, largely because the major players have very different interests and views. Governance is lagging behind the tech.
The regulation challenge.
Fourth, that concept of meaningful human control is absolutely central. It's the key idea for trying to navigate the ethical and legal problems.
MHC is crucial.
Fifth, there's strong and diverse opposition from activists, scientists, the public, particularly against fully autonomous systems that remove humans from the loop.
Significant pushback exists.
And finally, the long-term impacts are potentially huge and destabilizing. We're talking about arms races, crisis instability, and a fundamental change in how wars are fought and maybe even started.
Okay, that's a really helpful summary. So as you, the listener, can probably tell, this whole area of AI-powered autonomous weapons is incredibly complex. It's packed with crucial questions, and frankly, there are no easy answers.
Not at all. From the nuts and bolts of the technology to the really deep ethical questions and the global political maneuvering, it's something that definitely warrants our attention and careful thought.
We really hope this conversation has given you a clearer picture of the main issues involved and maybe sparked some more curiosity.
Wow.
What stands out to you as the biggest challenge here, or maybe the biggest potential change AWS could bring?
It's definitely a conversation that's just beginning in many ways. The technology is moving fast, and as we've seen, the international community is actively wrestling with it, especially within the UN framework.
Yeah, the future of how conflicts are fought, and maybe more fundamentally, the role of human beings in making those life and death decisions, it really does feel like it's hanging in the balance right now.
We definitely encourage you to keep exploring this. Think about the different viewpoints, the arguments for and against, and consider what it all might mean for our collective future.
And for more deep dives into AI and how it's shaping our world, please do subscribe to the Before AGI podcast. Also, if you're looking for more AI content, maybe tutorials, other insights, check out my YouTube channel. That's Ian Ochieng AI, spelled O-C-H-I-E-N-G.
Lots more to learn there. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today.
We'll be back soon with another exploration into the fascinating and sometimes challenging world of artificial intelligence. Until then, keep learning and keep asking questions.
Bye for now.